And last speaker after today is Chris Mungall. So he's at Lawrence Berkeley Lab. And he's going to talk to us about how to use LinkML, which is a way of integrating ontology into data.
This font is too small. Can you help me find the slideshow?
Okay.
Or is it there? Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Satra, for the invitation to speak here. So I'm Chris Mungall. I'm at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. I'm not a neurophysiologist. I don't have any fancy spinning brain images to show you today, but I do love open data, and I think that's probably why I'm here. And I'm going to talk to you about an open data framework that a number of us have been developing, and a number of people in the room have been contributing to, called LinkML, the Linked Data Modeling Language, and in particular about how we're using LinkML to make data AI ready, and using AI to also enhance the use of LinkML for creation of schemas and metadata. So I'm at a national laboratory. I work very closely with colleagues in the earth and environmental sciences area, including climate modelers, and they tell me they have data integration solved. And I'm kind of jealous in a way, because a lot of it is just coordinates and various measurements on coordinates, and that's wonderful if you have that kind of data. It's pretty easy to kind of like exchange netCDF files or whatever, and kind of like all be talking the same language. But unfortunately, our data is just, I like to think a little bit more complex than that. It's much more heterogeneous. Even if you're only looking at a single modality like neurophysiology data, there's so much you need to record as well about the actual context. You need to capture rich metadata, not just about the data itself, but about the the various kind of experimental setups that you have, what kind of organism this is, what the coordinates in the brain are. And it's not just a matter of measurement of values at different locations. A lot of the data that we have is not just numerical, but highly categorical in nature. And to derive the most value out of it, it needs to be linked together as well. So, and we can see this as we start to bring in more other kinds of data modalities. So, omics data, which I'm more familiar with. There's all kind. We saw some of this from Lydia's talk as well. So this is from the BICCN paper on the cell census atlas of the mammalian primary cortex. So this is a wonderful example of kind of showing, bringing together different kinds of transcriptomics, spatial omics data, as well as properties of cellular structures like dendrites and dendrite morphology and so on. And here the data management and the metadata gets even more complex, because you have other kinds of modalities to bring in, different kinds of coordinate systems and so on. And if we really want to be able to realize this dream of being able to build foundational models that take these different data modalities and truly integrate them together, we're going to have to solve this problem of how to link and label this data. Because we're learning that we can do a lot with machine learning, with unsupervised data within each individual modality. You can give it, like ChatGPT, huge amounts of text, or you can give it huge amounts of sequence data. There's genomic models like Evo2 and so on. But they derive most of their value when you then go and you do reinforcement learning or fine-tuning with labeled data. And to really derive the value from the multimodal data, you need to be able to link these data sets together. And so I work a lot with ontologies, and ontologies are definitely part of the solution here. They can help you standardize and label this data and to organize your metadata. I've highlighted a few ontologies that I work on from the OBO Foundry, the Open Biomedical Ontologies Foundry. I'm one of the PIs on the Gene Ontology project. This project seeks to provide a standard vocabulary for annotating the function of genes. Example terms are things like dopamine receptor activity, dendrite, synaptic vesicle cycling, and so on. We use this for unifying functional descriptions across organisms, and also for being able to interpret complex omics data. I'm also part of the team that develops Mondo, the ontology of diseases and disorders, where we have terms for neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's disease, genetic subtypes of epilepsy. I also work on the cell type ontology, which is aims to be a standard vocabulary for cell types that you can use for annotating single cell data, and aims to work in concert with some of the cell type discovery work that we see coming in from single cell transcriptomics data. And finally, the Uberon anatomy ontology, which serves as a common reference framework and terminology for being able to describe different body parts and different neuroanatomical regions across not just mammals, but across all vertebrates, and it's used for standardizing and interpreting gene expression data, anatomical atlases, and so on. But ontologies, while they are a necessary part of this solution, are not in themselves sufficient. They provide a common vocabulary which you can use to translate the different labels you may have in different databases or different data sets. But these databases will typically have different schemas or different data models, whether it's to describe the actual metadata or to actually describe how things are structured and linked together within those data sets. And we have a lot of options for being able to define the structures that we have within our different databases. And what we tend to see is different communities cluster around a group of technologies or a group of modeling languages that they like for their purposes. I know some of you in the room are kind of fans of semantic web technologies and standards like OWL and Shackle and Shex. People coming more from a clinical domain might be more familiar with common data elements and electronic health record exchange formats like FHIR. More traditional database developers, SQL, Pydantic, Protobuf, and so on. And then, of course, a lot of you are working with kind of high volume data, maybe more comfortable with things like HDF5, NetCDF, or data science friendly frameworks like Pandas and Parquet. And of course, a lot of our community just loves to work with kind of like Excels, even though it will always correct dates to gene names to dates, and so on. But LinkML is intended to work with these systems and serve essentially as a universal converter box for being able to, rather than take over these different kind of frameworks, is to able to allow people to use the tools that work best. If you work with a relational database, then you should continue to work with relational databases, but you want some kind of framework in which you can talk to people using other formalisms as well. So LinkML aims to provide that. We like to think of it in terms of, if you can think of the kind of the ladder of kind of complexity, technical expertise, but also being able to be very kind of precise in how you describe your data. You've got very simple forms like spreadsheets up here, going right the way up to more sophisticated semantic web modeling languages like RDF and OWL. But we like to think of LinkML off to the side as being delivering you that kind of high semantic clarity, but at the same time being something that's more approachable and user-friendly for both database developers and for scientists who aren't necessarily big data modeling geeks. So we think of LinkML in terms of these three different aspects. There's the social aspect. It's really there as a means of communication, of connecting different experts together, domain experts, data scientists, ontologists, and software engineers. But primarily at its core is a data modeling language. You can think of it like JSON schema on steroids. But it also comes with a large tool chain that is growing and that many of you are contributing to. This includes different integrations for different database systems, for different frameworks like JSON or OWL or Shackle or Shex and so on, as well as a growing number of tools that help you author schemas or help you generate data entry forms from a schema or help you normalize and clean up data according to a schema. So I won't go into all of those, but I'll just give you a kind of sense of, in concrete terms, what it looks like. At its core, it is a YAML format, if you're familiar with that allows you to describe all of the different elements within your domain. And then there's many different hooks within the language where you can go in and you can essentially kind of provide a little bit more information that will make your schema just a little bit more semantically clear, a little bit more fair. Some of these things are optional, but this has a number of aspects to it. Each LinkML schema is uniquely identifier. Every single element within the schema, every class, every attribute has its own permanent URL or unique identifier, so it can be referred to externally. It can reuse other schemas. It can reuse existing vocabularies like schema.org, and it can interoperate using different using ontology terms, and you can actually bind the enumerated values within a schema to ontology terms. So as an example here, let's just say I'm creating a metadata schema for describing single-cell transcriptomic experiments. I've maybe got my single-cell metadata records, and I want to have a little slot in the schema where people can describe what the cell type it was that was assayed. And we don't want people to type free text here because they might type something that is hard to normalize later on. We want people to maybe use a subset of terms from the cell ontology, maybe the branch of the cell ontology dealing with neurons, but maybe restricted to mammalian neurons. So unlike something like JSON schema enums, this gives you a way of being able to bind the values in your drop-downs essentially either to individual ontology terms, or you can even use this kind of graph-like query language to restrict it to being kind of particular branches within the ontology. So one example of use for standardization is within the Genomic Standards Consortium. This produces something called the Minimal Information About a Sequence standard that is used by the INSDC databases. Previously, this was managed essentially as an Excel spreadsheet, which was terrible for maintainability, terrible for being able to automatically check values against it. And you can see this if you go and have a look at some of the biosample metadata that exists in NCBI or EBI at the moment. So GSE switched to using LinkML, and it's moved all of its kind of spreadsheet management over to this kind of system. And it allows it to formally bind to the different ontologies that are used as part of this system. We're using this in the national labs as part of the National Microbiome Data Collaborative. So this is a multi-omics database encompassing metagenomics, metatranscriptomics, lipidomics, proteomics, different kinds of data. And we have a need to track all of the site and sample information, all of the different processing steps, all of the different computational workflows that are run, and the resulting data objects, track the provenance across them, and allow interfaces into this so people can query it or people can enter data using mobile apps that they can use out in the field. And this system is all driven by a LinkML schema. So just as important is the community itself. Many of you here are part of this community. All of you are welcome to join. We have we piggyback on the Obo Slack workspace. Anyone can come in and make issues or PRs on our GitHub repository. You can see there's a lot of different contributors to the different parts, whether it's the model itself or whether it's some of the surrounding tooling. So I just want to tell you a story about how a major new feature arose within LinkML. So Oliver here, part of NWB, is part of the same institute as me. He kind of approached me one day and said, hey, this LinkML looks great for being able to describe metadata and semantics and so on. We might be able to make use of this, but how do you do arrays in LinkML? And my answer was like, well, actually you can. And that may seem strange to many of you in this room, but coming from a relational database modeling, semantic web modeling perspective, which is based on predicate logic and mathematical logic, arrays aren't really kind of first-class structures there, but they are if you're coming more from a kind of programming language. Anyway, that answer didn't really satisfy Oliver, and for good reason, so we set about working with Ryan and Johnny Saunders and some others, and we essentially arrived at a way of making arrays, multi-dimensional arrays, first-class structures within LinkML, so you can now make your multi-dimensional array data AI ready. And I want to thank the organizers of the LinkML Neurodata Hackershop, and this was sponsored by the NWB and the Dandy project, and we had that in Berkeley last year. So thank you to everyone involved who contributed to that. And I'll just talk a little bit about how we're making use of LinkML to help us in various data extraction and knowledge extraction pipelines. The goal here is that we have a lot of unstructured data out there, whether it's in papers or lab notebooks, clinical notes, maybe semi-structured databases, databases that are incomplete, don't have everything we need, or data sets of varying degrees of structuredness. And of course, like everyone, we're looking at different ways of using AI to turn this into more structured forms, whether it's a warehouse database or data lakes or knowledge graphs or semantic schemas and so on. And I think like many of us, we've followed a kind of similar evolution here. In the pre-ChatGPT days, we were making use of dictionary-based methods, named entity recognition, classic NLP, to be able to align terms within schemas and so on. Then with the advent of ChatGPT, we started looking at various zero-shot methods, and we developed a method called ontologies, where you could give it a LinkML schema along with the ontology bindings, and it would extract and map the terms to those bindings. After that, last year, we were doing a lot of work with retrieval augmented generation and the Curate GPT system, but like many people, we're switching over to basically agentic approaches, and this is, if you've ever used something like ChatGPT's deep research or something, this will give you a flavor of what these kind of tools can do. So you essentially allow the LLM to not just answer questions from its own sometimes faulty internal knowledge, but you give it access to tools, so it can go and it can query databases and it can write scripts and so on, and go off and kind of solve problems that way. And in fact, one of the original instances of agent-based systems was the Blackboard system. So I come from a good old-fashioned AI system, so I liked hearing Blackboards versus AI standoff earlier today, and I think that these things can actually work together. But just to kind of give you an example of how that can work, we've developed an agent system called Aurelian, which is sort of a kitchen sink of different agents that might be useful within biology, bioinformatics, and so on. And it includes a LinkML agent. And then due to the magic of the Claude Model Context Protocol, MCP, you can now just go into, you can use your favorite, well, not all of your favorite, but if you use something like Claude Desktop, where you can have access to various MCP bindings, you can now go in, configure it to use the LinkML MCP, and you can say things like, hey, Claude, I want to create a LinkML schema based on this, this example data, or you can even do things like plonk in an image that you've drawn on a whiteboard or a blackboard of a schema. So I did this with just one of the figures from the NWB paper, and it kind of asks you, I'm going to use a tool for this, are you okay with that? And you say okay, and it will go off and it will generate a schema. But unlike just doing this directly within ChatGPT, it will also run tools like run the LinkML validation suite over this to make sure that the schema is actually valid. So agents are a lot of fun. I encourage people to try using those. And then we're developing a tool called LinkML Store that is essentially a way of providing access to a number of the different databases and object stores and vector databases and so on that might be used. So you can use this essentially as a bridging layer over different databases, but it's also intended to be AI ready as well. So it comes with functionality for being able to use retrieval augmented generation, as well as being able to kind of make inferences using both standard ML and LLMs over your data as well. So just to kind of quickly plug the Bridge to AI program, and just to really kind of make the point here that we need to go. FAIR itself is not enough. We need to go beyond FAIR, and we need to think about things like the provenance of data, characterization, explainability of AI models, and we have a kind of way of thinking about how LinkML plays within into that overall ecosystem. So just to summarize, I think AI depends on having our data be both well labeled with standardized labels, being linked together, and also having sufficient comprehensive contextual metadata about it. And then LinkML, provides not only the technical framework for this, but the social glue and the various tools you might need for schema management, schema evolution, populating data within that schema, as well as data extraction as well. And with that, I just want to thank the many people involved, in particular Sierra Moxon, who leads a lot of the LinkML development efforts, and some of our funders, NIH, DOE, and CZI Wellcome Trust. And with that, I'll take any questions.
We have time for 2 quick questions.
Thanks for the talk. There are a number of data schemas models out there, including from the Allen Institute. Do we need a universal converter between these different data schemas, or do we even need one anymore with AI being able to translate basically? Or, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I didn't mention one of the tools that we have, or one component of LinkML, is something called LinkML Map, and it's an extension of something else we developed called SESAM, which is an ontology mapping standard. The idea here is you can specify in a declarative fashion, here's how this field in this Allen schema maps to NWB or something like that, and then automatically execute that. Now, of course, with the advent of LLMs, they can do a lot of that for you. We still think it's useful to have essentially as an explainable middle layer, a high-level specification. And like many parts of the LinkML stack, we see them as technical components, but also a social component that the domain experts can come in and see, oh, yeah, I see you're mapping this to this, that makes sense, but there's this additional nuance that you didn't know about when you're trying to map that to that. So it's more about trying to tease out and make these mappings just more declarative and more open and more explainable.
Thanks.
Eric.
Yeah, I can just shout it out. How far away are we from some sort of ontology for classes of models, like the mean field type of models that David Kleinfeld was showing us in his challenge talk, or some sort of general way of describing RNNs as function approximators? So to try to have an ontology of models that may be field specific.
Yeah. There are a few efforts out there already. I mean, some of these fit within the EDAM framework, EDAM. So it's more about describing kind of software and algorithms, but there's a small component there about models that is not as granular as what you need. We developed something called the AI ontology, which has AI models, but that's different from what you're talking about. I think it really just takes the right community to come together and do this, and it's much easier now to develop ontologies than it used to be, in terms of like a lot of the tooling used to be very kind of clunky. Using a lot of these AI methods, it's faster now, but you need to bring in the right experts and have the right processes for deliberating over what the terms should be included and excluded. So, but yeah, I'd be interested in talking more about that.
All right, thank you.